Morning, everyone. In 2018, I had a heart attack. 2 weeks after the attack, my wife asked me if I wanted to take a walk. I was nervous, even a little scared, because I wasn't sure of my own capabilities. So we decided to go down. Now, my residential complex has a 200-meter circuit that you can walk. We started walking. And about midway through that walk, 100 meters or so, I stopped and I sat down. I couldn't walk another step. My wife had to go home, get the wheelchair, and take me back home. I was shattered. I couldn't believe that this was happening to me. Growing up, I was very active. I used to play a lot of sports. I used to generally be active around in school and college. Things were going well. But when my career started, when I started to work, the career took precedence, the family took precedence, and not that I ignored my health, but I did neglect it a little bit. It was one of those things that happen to pretty much everyone that you meet or see in the early parts of their career. I kept at sports, I kept active, but generally speaking, I was just keeping my head afloat water. Somewhere in my mid 30s, at a dinner, I met someone who started to speak about his journey as a marathoner. And as I stood there listening to that story, I was inspired. I thought to myself, if this person can run, maybe I can run a marathon too. So that evening, as we drove home from the party, I said to my wife, I'm going to run a marathon. The very next day, in the morning, put on my shorts, put on my t-shirt, and decided to go for a run. I lasted about a kilometer, maybe even less than that. And I stopped. I was breathing heavily, I was sweating, and I realized that despite all my claims of being generally fit and keeping active, I was nowhere close to running a marathon. So I came back, I researched a little bit about running, and I started my journey for running. That 1 kilometer soon became 5 kilometers, it became 10 kilometers, and eventually, 6 months later, I ran my first half marathon. That's 21 kilometers for those of you who don't know. And then I was addicted. Very soon, I wasn't just running 21 kilometers. I was running 40 kilometers. I was running ultra marathons. And in a bout of insanity, I actually ran across the Gobi Desert 250 kilometers in 50 degrees over 6 days. That's how addicted I was. I also started to climb, a love that I developed in school, but had forgotten about it for some time. I got interested in climbing very early in my life. And then when this happened and I got a little fit, I started to climb again. I also realized that there were people around me that had the same love for the outdoors, but had forgotten about it or ignored it as they focused on their careers. So I persuaded a few of them to start to look at getting active again. And what was born at that point of time was what we loosely called the Fight Back Club. A bunch of 35-year-olds and above who decided that they wanted to climb again, run again. And this motley group would get together every year and climb, run together, and just celebrate life. We were having fun. People were making life changes because they went back to running and climbing. From quitting smoking to reducing drinking to getting healthier lifestyles, all of that stuff started to happen. And as I saw that around me, I realized that I was making a difference. People's lives were getting changed towards the better. I thought this was good. I was happy. I was motivated to do more. And then 2018 happened. January of 2018, I came back from a workout in the morning. I just run a half marathon about 3 days before that. I came home and I was feeling a little uneasy. So I told my wife that it's probably because I had not eaten something, and I asked her to give me some tea and a couple of biscuits. As I sat on the bed and I opened the newspaper and reached out to change the page, I realized that I couldn't move my left hand. I knew something was wrong. So we raced to the hospital. I walked into the ER. I said to the doctor, "Something's wrong," and I collapsed. By the time the doctors got to my heart, it was severely damaged. My ejection fraction, or EF as it's called, was down to about 20%, which essentially means that my heart, after they had finished all of the surgery, was only operating at 20% capacity. So it wasn't surprising when a couple of weeks later, we did that 200-meter round and I couldn't walk beyond the 100 meters. Imagine in a period of 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I had gone from running ultra marathons and crazy distances and climbing 6,000-meter peaks to struggling to climb 3 or 4 steps. I went into a bout of depression, self-doubting myself, not sure of what I could do. And this went on for a couple of months. One day, as we were sitting on the dining table with my kids and wife, my kids who had seen me active and who had themselves developed the love for climbing and outdoors said to me, and I remember these words very carefully. They said, "Dad, does that mean that you will never climb with us again?" I choked on my food. I couldn't take another bite in. 2 hours later, I was at my doctor's clinic. And I asked him again. I said, "Can I go back to the lifestyle that I really love?" And he said, "No." And I said to him, I said, "I have to go back to the lifestyle that I had of running, of climbing. Are the conditions under which I can do this?" So very hesitantly, And with a lot of negotiations, he said, let's start and see how you progress. So I came back home, and the very next day I said, I have to start walking. It was slow, it was painful, it was embarrassing as I started this journey again. That 100 meters became 200 meters, became 500 meters, became a little bit of running, became a little bit of cycling, became a little bit of swimming. But every now and then I was reminded that my body wasn't the same as what it was prior to the attack. There were days when I didn't want to get out of bed. And that's when my family, my wife, the kids pushed me along. And slowly the strength developed. Slowly I was able to do things. Exactly a year after the attack, on the first anniversary of the attack, accompanied by a very close friend of mine, and under the watchful eyes of my doctors and my family, I ran my first 10K, exactly a year after the attack. It was a cause of celebration. I was happy, but not satisfied. So, the very next day after the 10K, I went back to the doctor and we were back on the negotiating table. And I said, I have to climb now. And he said, no. And I said to him, I said, either you allow me to climb or I'll change my doctor. So he said, okay, let's see your progress and let's decide on how much you can climb. And he said, the first attempt of climbing cannot be more than 4,000 meters. And I was doing a lot of research trying to figure out if there was someone who had a AICD device that I had in my heart who was climbing, and I couldn't find anyone. So 18 months after the attack, I joined an expedition in which my daughter was also a part of, and we attempted a peak where I, for the first time, was not attempting to climb, but staying as the base camp manager just a shade below 4,000 meters. We had a successful attempt. A 5-member women team climbed that peak that year, the only team that was successful that summer, but I stayed at base camp at 4,000 meters. We came back, and about a couple of days after celebrating this summit that my daughter was part of, I was back at the doctor's, again, negotiating to see what more he would allow me to do. He looked at all my stats because I was monitoring them very closely and recording them. And he said to me, he said, you can climb 400 meters, additional 400 meters every year. That was music to my ears. Unfortunately, in 2020 and 2021, COVID struck. But I didn't stop exercising. I was one of those crazy guys who was running inside the house, logging my miles, exercising, using, bags of wheat and flour, using anything in the house to build my strength. So 2020 and 2021, that's what I was doing. When 2022 came around and it was climbing season in the summers, I went back to the doctor and I said, I'm going to count the 400 meters for every year. So this year, I should be allowed to climb 5,200 meters. He said, okay. And I chose to go to Everest Base Camp. It's a little over 5,200 meters. But I said, let's make a statement. Now, my entire journey post the attack, I was documenting and putting on social media. And I used to get a lot of encouraging messages from people. The journey to the Everest Base Camp was very challenging. The doctor had said that you cannot let your heart rate go beyond a certain number, which meant that as you got up on altitude, you had to stop and let your heart rate come down. So it was funny, but I was probably one of the only trekkers on that route who you would find lying flat on the ground looking at the sky. There'll be lots of people around you that will tell you about the things that you can't do. But there will be people around you who will also tell you that there are things that you can do. Those are the ones that you need to focus on. Again, I'm not asking you to climb mountains. I'm going to climb mountains. You need to identify yourselves for yourselves. What is it that you want to climb? You will have your own set of challenges that you need to overcome. Go out and do that. And I say this from my battery operated, weak heart. Push yourselves, because that's going to make a difference. Thank you.